Okay, it is 11 o'clock. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Cabinet. This was originally, as you know, scheduled for the 16th of September, but was postponed as a result of the passing of the Queen. So remember, it's broadcast live on the website, will be archived, and you can view it afterwards. Normal rules on microphone, on when you speak, off when you're not. So the next one I've got is apologies for absence. We've definitely not got Blake Payne. He's taking exams today. And moving to the minutes on pages 3 to 10, I'll move the minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of June are a correct record. Deborah?
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favour? Excellent. Urgent items, there are none. Going straight to declarations of interest, so I'll go, just one here I've got written down. All Cabinet members who are district councillors are expected to declare and other registrable interest in item 6, which is the Leicester and Leicestershire Authority's statement of common ground to housing development land needs. So we'll all declare that if that's okay. And then following on from that, we've got Mr. Shepherd, Mrs. Taylor and Mrs. Radford, who are dual hatters and represent Charnwood. So I presume they want to declare another registrable interest in item 7, the Charnwood Local Plan 2021 to 2037. Highways and transportation matters, is that correct? Okay, so can you record those, Matt? Moving swiftly on then to the medium-term financials. Oh, sorry, Pam, I didn't see you. Yes, Pam.
I'd just like to declare an interest as a Melton Mowbray Council on item 5, the discussion about the North East Road.
Okay, register that then, thank you. Medium-term financial strategy, MTFS, pages 15 to 16. There's a supplementary report on pages 3 to 54. This provides an update on our worsening financial position and seeks approval for a wide-ranging measures to help mitigate the position. Scrutiny Commission considered the report on the matter at its meeting on the 7th of September, and its comments are attached to the order paper marked 4A. We've also received comments from the Labour Group, which are attached marked 4B, and I thank the Labour Group for their positive comments and recognition that we aren't trying to hide anything under a bushel. They mentioned me and you in particular, Chiefs. So we've got Chris Tambini, Director of Corporate Resources, to present the report. Then I'll go to Lee Brecken, who has responsibility for this. Chris.
Thank you, Leader. I know Cabinet members are very well versed in our financial position, so I'm just going to pull out a few figures from the report. This year we're overspending by nearly 14 million, and we do have a plan to finance that, which is laid out in detail in the report, so I'm not going to go through that. But it does require quite a lot of one-off use of resources to balance the position. And next year the gap grows to 28 million, and it could be 135 million by 2026. And this is clearly the toughest position we've been in. The key driver is inflation, but it's worth noting the demand for services continues to grow, particularly around social care. And just to complete the misery, I'm just going to mention capital and special education needs. In terms of capital, we have reviewed the capital programme and we've made some relatively minor changes. But we are expecting some more bad news given inflation on capital schemes is outpacing that in other areas. And the report gives a figure, potential inflationary pressures of around £45 million. And special education needs, demand pressures again continue to grow, and the deficit at the end of this financial year is forecast to be nearly 40 million. The purpose of this report is twofold. One is to raise awareness of our position. And the second purpose is to give us officers time to develop proposals that we bring to Cabinet in December to balance the overall budget. As we have done in previous years, we are going to maximise efficiencies, and we do think in terms of savings that 80% of savings will be through efficiencies. However, for the first time in a number of years, we do think we're going to have to reduce services. And I think no doubt when we come back in December, in terms of the 2023-24 budget, it will include proposals for service cuts. There is some comfort the fact that we're not alone, and based on conversations I've had with authorities around the country and surveys that have been run, we do know that nearly all upper tier authorities are going to be facing similar challenges. In fact, a survey we ran for the Society of County Treasurers showed that the average gap next year is in the order of £40 million for county councils. So clearly a major issue. I mean, our issue is always kind of compounded by the fact we are the lowest funded county council in the country. Goes without saying it's going to be tough. The government could find some extra funding for local authorities, but it does seem unlikely that this will happen at a meaningful level to have an impact on our overall position. Hopefully there will be something, and if there is anything, I think it will be around social care. There was an announcement yesterday for some extra money in terms of this financial year. We'd have to wait and see in terms of if there's any money for next year. Probably many of us kind of listened to the mini budget this morning, and clearly that is going to increase the national debt. And I think consequently the consequence of that is going to be that any prospect of extra funding for public services is going to be limited. I am going to end on one minor bit of good news. We have received confirmation that the household support funding is going to come through. So we got recommendation G on the green order paper, and just say that the funding has come through for free school meal vouchers for the October half term. That's been confirmed.
Thank you, Chris. I'll go straight to Lee.
Thank you, Chairman. In a week since writing the report, the change due to interest rates will have already had effect on our cost of borrowing. In a press briefing earlier this week, Nick Rushton, as leader of Leicestershire County Council, said our financial position and situation is frightening, dire and worse than the years of austerity. As Cabinet Member for Resources, I added that we knew in the year pressure was building, but a perfect storm of global events such as COVID, Russia's war in Ukraine, and the cost of the living crisis, plus spiralling demand, meant that we now have to look across all our services. This will include things that affect our everyday lives, such as road repairs, gritting, big road schemes, waste sites, as well as support for adults and children. As an authority, we don't want to do this, and we are aware that this comes at a time when people are increasingly struggling to make ends meet. Support for people who need it most will be prioritised, and we'll be continuing to press our MPs and the new government for a better deal for our taxpayers and to reform special educational needs and disability support. MPs have been made aware of our position, and we will continue to highlight our position on lack of funding to deliver our statutory services and fairer funding also. Government need to recognise the financial realities faced, not so much by the council, but by the people and their families that are reliant on our services. We really cannot be any more transparent and open to the current financial situation. We are not alone, as Chris has said, who is president of the County Council Treasurers Association. Many major authorities have already indicated that they'll be in deficit by the end of this year, and again that the same have also indicated they have frightening figures for 23-24. We are recognised as the best performing council. We are prudent, and we have not been adverse to making challenging cuts over many years, but now something has to give for us to balance our books. Over the autumn, we will ask residents to help shape the plans we will need to make, and more information on how people can comment will be available later this month. The Council will publish its 4-year budget proposals in December. I am happy to propose the recommendations as set out on the order paper. I also would like to thank the Scrutiny Commission for its comments in the report. Also, as Nick has said, thank the Labour Group. The leader promised that we'd be open and transparent in this difficult process, and I think we are doing that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Lee. I'll formally second and reserve. Deborah?
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, not great reading at all, is it, for any of us? Really difficult times ahead of us. Just want to put on record, obviously, the Children and Families Services is demand-led budget, but we are going to have to cut our cloth and have to restrict what children we can and can't support. So there will be some changes coming forward. We are working with our partners to look at what we can do to spend our budgets better in a more innovative way, but we'll see what comes of that review. But we really need the government to bring forward the review of social care and the SEND review that's ongoing at the moment. We really need decisions made really quickly on that, because what I've read in those papers already, if that becomes into policy, will help our budgets greatly. So it's just to urge, we need to get on with this, otherwise we're going to be in a worse position. So we will do all we can, but it's tough times ahead for us.
Thank you, Deborah. Ozzy?
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'd like to echo what Deborah has said in relation to the send. You know, we work hard here. The officers of this council work very hard in providing all the services across the piece for every part of the service. And as Chris has said, you know, we're one of the lowest funded councils. In fact, the lowest funded council. And I appeal to our MPs and to the government to actually, you know, put some money towards us, because we need fair funding. You know, it's not only the children's service, it's not only the adult service that are suffering. You know, we're going to be coming through, highways are going to suffer as well, because we need to prioritise in the future where we spend our money on the vulnerable. And we will always, this council will always look after the vulnerable, as we have a good record of doing. So my thoughts are concerned for the future. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Ozzy. Christine?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, it's a good report, but not a good report in the fact that it highlights the concerns that my department's got, and so very similar to the children's, it's a demand-led budget. We've got to prioritise for the more vulnerable, and there's 2 papers coming on later on where we've got main concerns about how we're going to finance all the problems that we're going to have. So yes, I just ask people to give it a good read and see what problems that we've got forthcoming. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. I reserve my remarks, so I'll just say these are particularly frightening times for us as an administration. It's the worst that Chris and I have experienced since we've both been in post, because I started as leader at the same time as Chris started off as Director of Resources. It's loads worse than austerity. We will have to make service cuts, unfortunately. They will be politically difficult and problematic, but we do want to hear from members of the public when we start publishing where we're going to look. We've done a whole list of where we potentially can look. None of those are in, none of those are out, but everybody knows where the savings will have to be made, so please respond to them. But you can see why, you know, when you've got inflation running 15%-ish, 20% in construction, and we've got increased demand in children and adults, which we've got a manifesto pledge to protect, and only a 3% maximum council tax rise. We're underwater between 12 and 15% every year. We will not be going to the residents asking for a referendum to increase council tax, because I know the answer. They'll say no, thank you, and would have wasted £1 million on a ballot. So we are stuck where we are without government help, and it will be tough. And I can say again and promise to the opposition, especially the Labour group, have been relatively supportive, that we will be honest and open, and they will be involved in the savings, which none of us particularly want to make. But unless we get more money from the government, the savings, as sure as night follows day, will have to come, because we will set a balanced budget and we will not be going bankrupt. So having said that, it was moved by Lee, seconded by me. All in favour? Thank you. Thank you, Chris, and thank your team for the work you do down there. So that was agenda item 4. So agenda item 5 is the North and East Melton Mowbray Distributor Road. Approval to submit the full business case. This is on 17 to 24. It's exactly what it says on the tin. So you're going to introduce it, Anne, and we note that Pam has declared a non-pecuniary interest. Anne, and Anne's Director of Environment and Transport.
Thank you, Leader. As Cabinet is aware, we've been working on developing the northeast section of the Melton Mowbray Distributor Road for a number of years now. In order to draw down the 49.5 million that DfT have awarded to the scheme, the final step is to submit a full business case to DfT for their approval. This report seeks authority for us to do that and gives an update on the scheme. The forecast scheme cost, as was reported to Cabinet in September last year, September 2021, was 85.3 million, with a further 5 million contingency on top of that. As Cabinet is aware, however, and you've just been hearing, that since that time, inflation has reached a 40-year high, and actually construction inflation has at times seen even higher levels than the kind of normal rates of inflation. Inflation estimates on the previous scheme cost of just over 90 million has increased the figure to 106 million. In order to submit the business case, however, we need to have an absolutely up-to-date scheme cost, and this comes in the form of what we call a target price. That is delivered from the contractor, so he's working on that now. That work's currently ongoing, and we expect to have it concluded in October. Current indications, however, that this could be anywhere up to 15% greater than the latest cost estimate we have. At present, the funding package we've got comprises of the 49.5 million that DfT have allocated provisionally subject to approval of this full business case, 4 million from the LEP, 14 million developer contributions, and the residual would be met by the council. The report seeks approval for us to submit the full business case on the proviso that the target price, when we have that in October, it still means the scheme represents value for money. After that, we would propose bringing a report back to the December Cabinet covering the outcome of that target price exercise. So, that latest, most up-to-date cost estimate, confirming DfT funding, i.e. that's on the assumption that DfT have come back and approved the full business case, and that is within the timescales we're anticipating that, so that Cabinet then can consider whether the scheme moves into construction, whether it's still affordable. So we're proposing that report in December to present to Cabinet that information. One final point I would just raise that we do have ongoing discussions going with government via ADEPT. ADEPT is the Association of Directors of Environment, Economy, Planning and Transport, basically because, we're not alone in, seeing significant cost increases in major projects, as I'm sure you'll understand. And, the issue of the level of risk that sits with the local highway authority on the government where they award funding to a scheme. That risk sits with us, as you fully understand. Any outcome from that, those conversations will be reported in December to Cabinet as part of that final deliberation. Recommendations are as per the order paper. Thank you.
Thank you. And just so I've got this clear in my head, you're projecting the road as £106 million.
That was the latest cost estimate. We're now having to do the up-to-date moment. We need to get a realistic up-to-date one. That's the target price.
So if we've got, say, if I just ask you in broad terms, let's say it comes back at 110 million, and as far as I can make out, you've only got 67 coming in. Where are we going to get the other 43 million from, bearing in mind the previous paper?
The only other option would be forward funding and borrowing the authority, which would be a consideration when we have that final price. We come back, and assuming we get approval from DfT for the full business case, we present to Cabinet in December that position with the clear quantities of forward funding and borrowing that would be required for a wider consideration of, at that time, is that affordable for the authority?
Ozzy.
Thank you. I'm happy to move this, Leader. This report outlines the need for officers to submit the North East Melton Mowbray Distributor Road full business case to the Department of Transport. The Council also needs to get an up-to-date target cost from the developer, which is expected in October, as we've heard from Anne. We all know that inflation is running high, and at the present time, material costs are running over 20%. It's vital we get an up-to-date target cost for this, so that the council can make a decision. The worry that I have as the Cabinet Member for Highways is where we're going to get the funding from with the state of this council at the present time. We've got diligent, dedicated officers working for us in Highways and across the council, but they can't and do not have a magic money tree. So we need to look to the future for funding from the government better for our road system and for the council in whole. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll formally second and reserve. Deborah?
You did mention funding from the LEP there. Is there any option to increase that funding from the LEP? Because obviously we all realise how important this road is and how long we've taken to get to this point. And obviously, depending on that, is to produce the housing for Melton as well. So it's really key that we do get this done. But like Ozzy and the leaders just said, we don't have a magic money tree.
We have sought to maximise funding from the LEP and indeed developer contributions. And as far as I'm aware, the LEP have not been allocated any new funding streams for governments for this type of thing for quite a while, actually. But, you know, the principle of trying to maximise the funding from whatever source, very much at the heart of what we're doing around the costing work for this.
Well, and I think the only solution here is that the DFT give us more money. I mean, they've not 49.5 million was a figure they had years ago. Have we formally asked them for more money? And when we ask them for more money, explain to them how exceedingly important this road is to Melton Mowbray and to Melton Mowbray's local plan. You know, I mean, all the houses are around this road, but they're going to have to give us some more money, because there is no way, when I've just seen that previous paper, that we can afford to fund £50 million shortfall, in my view. I mean, obviously we're not making that decision today, but the DFT needs to understand the problem we're in.
We have asked the DFT for more money, as a number of other similar local, you know, authorities in similar positions have. And the DFT, this was a few weeks ago, the DFT's line has always been consistently over a number of years. The money we allocated you is the money we allocated you, full stop. However, more recent conversations, and particularly through a debate that I've been having with the DFT, there is a realisation actually that it's not sustainable for local authorities, and they've got a very real risk of a number of schemes being withdrawn, etc., that in theory they are funding. They are working on a process by which they want to work with local authorities like ourselves to understand, firstly, have you maximised your funding for it? Have you sought it from everywhere? Exactly, Deputy Leader, as you were saying. Then can you de-scope your scheme? Can you pause your scheme? What are your other opportunities? Then looking at, with your latest cost, does it still represent value for money? We are confident with this particular scheme, even with cost increases, it will still represent high value for money. And then if at the end of all those, if the answers are no, then discussions with ministers. Now, at the point at which we have a full business case that the DFT has approved and agreed is value for money scheme, is the point I think we go back and have another conversation with DFT to say this is the hard facts of the reality of the situation and we need a different approach. And having that full business case approval will put us in a better position to have that, which is very much why we're seeking the approval to submit for that today.
Sure. Well, I'm happy to submit the business case. I think perhaps, Anne, we should write to the Member of Parliament and ask her to lobby on our behalf, and also the leader of Melton Borough Council, so he understands the problems. I mean, he does, because I speak to him, but I think formally to let him know, because he can use his good offices to lobby for more money, because it's only money we need. We want to build it. Needs building, but we need money.
Happy to do that.
Okay. Moved by Ozzy, seconded by me. All in favour? Very good, thank you. So that was 5. So now I'm on 6, which is Leicester and Leicestershire Authority's statement of common ground relating to housing and employment land. This is a nice short paper, pages 25 to 670. It's asking us to sign up to it. Scrutiny Commission has considered a report on the 7th of September. Comments attached 6. Simon Lawrence is going to introduce it. He's the head of growth and major programmes. We've all declared an interest in it. Over to you, Simon.
Thank you, and good morning, Leader. The purpose of this report is to seek the Cabinet's approval for the County Council to become a signatory to the Leicester and Leicestershire Statement of Common Ground, which addresses the issues of Leicester and Leicestershire's housing and employment needs, the unmet need and the apportionment of that unmet need to 2036. It's a requirement of the planning legislation currently that local planning authorities demonstrate a duty to cooperate, and this is the most important when it relates to the redistribution of unmet housing need on this occasion arising from the city. The duty to cooperate in this instance is being demonstrated through the signatory to the Statement of Common Ground. To date, 5 of the 7 local planning authorities in Leicestershire have committed to signing the statement, with Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council and Harborough District Council still to agree a position. The recommendation that the County Council as a signatory to the Statement of Common Ground relates to the significance of securing funding for infrastructure through districts' local plans, and this is best done where a Statement of Common Ground is secured. The report also recommends that this Cabinet notes the increased infrastructure requirements arising from that unmet need, calculated as an additional 18,000 homes and 23 hectares of employment land by 2036, and that a revision to the allocation of the business rates between the City Council and the County Council should be considered to reflect this. And quickly, Leader, by way of background, in 2017, the City Council declared their unmet need for housing and employment. But then, however, immediately straight after in 2020, the government announced that a further 35% be allocated as the standard method for 20 largest cities. And that creates the level of unmet need that we're currently facing, and that a statement of common ground was required to support that. It's considered important that the statement of common ground is signed to allow the progression of local plan work across Leicester and Leicestershire, and to ensure that the plan development continues across the housing market area. And finally, Leader, the best way for the County Council to secure funding for infrastructure is through district councils having robust local plans, and a statement of common ground underpinning the duty to operate on this issue of the city's unmet need is a crucial part. The recommendations are set out on the order paper.
Good, I'll formally move them. Can I just ask you, if the two you mentioned don't sign, does that have any effect on the 5 plus us that do sign?
It has some bearing on the integrity of the statement, but not overall. What it will do is have difficulty for those 2 district borough councils when they consider their own local plans if they've not signed the statement of common ground.
Thank you. I'll formally move the recommendations, and I'm going to Deborah.
I'll second the recommendations, and I think it's important that all authorities sign the document to ensure we meet our housing numbers from the government across the city and county, but in a very planned way. I think all the additional housing allocated to the districts from the city will be taken through their own public examination, so to see if they are sustainable and available to be fitted into their district. So that process will continue anyway, but we need more housing. We need that housing to be in the right place with the right infrastructure, with the right amount of funding in place. And I think signing this statement of common ground helps us secure that going forward. So very happy to second this.
Thank you. We have no other speakers, so moved by me, seconded by Deborah. Thank you very much. So 7 is the Charnwood Local Plan 2021-2037, pages 671 to 674, and there's a supplementary 3 to 16. We note that Charnwood members have declared an interest. Over to you, Simon.
Thank you again, Leader. So the purpose of this report is to advise members of the impact and the required actions arising from the suspension and subsequent delay to the examination in public of the Charnwood Local Plan. During day 1 of the examination back in June, the Borough Council communicated to the inspectors a change to its approach, proposing that the apportionment of the city's unmet need that we've just referred to needed to be considered during this examination and not, as set out in the submitted plan, through a trigger review. The inspectors defined that immediately as a material change and suspended the examination. The report makes clear the implications of this delay to the County Council and sets out at paragraph 50 the evidence, clarification and information this council needs to be satisfied that the new approach being proposed by the Borough Council will reflect accurately the implications and therefore the required mitigation in respect of county infrastructure. Without this information, it is not possible for the County Council to form a view on the Borough Council's change in approach and amended local plan. The report also recommends that the Borough Council be notified that it is the view of this council that new formal governance and joint working arrangements be established to assist in the preparation and sharing of the outstanding information and evidence. The inspector's response to the material change in the Borough Council's approach is to convene 2 further examinations in public. The first will consider the allocation of the city's unmet need and the statement of common ground. This will happen at the end of next month. But based on the Cabinet's decision just now on the previous item, I can make the inspectors aware that it is this council's intention to sign that statement of common ground. What happens after the examination in October? This very much depends on the decisions taken at it. However, whatever is agreed, it's likely that the Borough Council will need to reconsider its housing strategy and potentially to consider the inclusion of additional sites. and that as a result of that, a further examination in public, examining the amended local plan will be necessary. This is currently anticipated to be held in early 2023. The other impact of the material changes in the approach and the suspension of the examination is the prolonging of the period in which Charnwood doesn't have a local plan and therefore exposed to the challenges of speculative development coming forward. This, of course, has a significant and immediate impact on this council through increased risk of development coming forward without the inclusion of adequate infrastructure. Paragraphs 27 to 41 set out the approach this council intends to adopt from an education and from a highways and transportation perspective during this period. Recommendation 3D seeks approval of this approach and that support from the Borough Council on this be sought. The recommendations in full are as set out on the order paper.
Great. Well, obviously, I support the recommendations. We do want to support and help Charnwood get its local plan done. I mean, they are 2.5 times the size of some of the boroughs, and they've got 2.5 times the size of the problems, but we want to support them. But we do need to ensure that they have the correct section 106, section 278 in place for what you call infrastructure. And for the record, I know we all understand what infrastructure is, but can you just outline so anybody who's watching online understands what we mean by infrastructure?
Of course, Leader. Yes, infrastructure is shorthand for highways and transportation measures, education, as well as other measures that are required to support other services that this council supplies, including adults and public health.
Very good. So it is paramount importance we get the agreements to those. Okay, I've moved it. Deborah?
I'll second this recommendation. I think we have been through a really difficult process due to the suspension of the local plan examination by the inspector due to the material change put forward by Charnwood on the first day of the examination. We had sort of originally put a lot of work into that by our very skilled officers to get ready for the examination, and now we have to go back over a lot of that work with the material change put forward by Charnwood. But that aside, we need to continue to work with Charnwood, and we need to stress that Charnwood need to supply the evidence requested by us to enable the process to move forward as quickly as possible. And I think you've just highlighted, Simon, but I will as well, that education and highways are the urgent items, and education is one of our statutory responsibilities to supply school places. So that is of utmost importance that we have those in the schools in the right places according to the houses that are planned to be built. I think we just need to also add that we have also other demands on our services from other local authorities to support their local plans as well as our normal operations. And I think moving forward, we all need to work together to set the timetable across the county. So all the districts need to get in line, really, that, you know, when they need our support for their local plans, we can't do that for all the districts at the same time. We simply don't have the resources, even with a full quota of staff. We just don't have the resources to do that, and we need to urge the districts to work together more closely to sort out their timetables for their local plans, so we don't end up in this situation that we're in at the moment with the demands that are put on us that we just simply can't respond to immediately, and that obviously affects Charnwood, but that's not through any fault of our own. So I'm happy to second the recommendations, but we do need to do some further work on this.
Yeah, we actually, both Simon and I attended the MAG, the Members Advisory Group, for this sort of thing yesterday, and we did make that point. And to be fair, I think at the time they type of recognised it, but we'll have to wait and see. We said to them, we've got too much work, we're short of planners, and in olden days when we had this amount of local plans coming through, we'd have just taken on more planners to try and deal with it. Well, A, there's no damn planners out there, and B, we haven't got any money to afford them. So they're going to have to work with us because we want to help them get these local plans through, but it is difficult. I've got Peter Bedford now.
Thank you, Leader. I just want to reiterate the point Simon made around the fact that without these local plans in place, you know, our communities are vulnerable to these speculative developments. Whilst I represent an area in Hinckley and Bosworth, who again is yet to have their plan in place, in Charnwood, which borders Markfield, we're seeing quite a few speculative developments coming through. I know in Deborah's electoral area, that actually will impact villages like I represent in Markfield, where because Charnwood doesn't have its 5-year land, doesn't have this plan in place, there's going to be a delay now until at least early next year. Those areas are really open to speculative development, and without those plans for the right infrastructure for the highways and the schools, it really will have an adverse impact on our community. So I just want to reiterate how important it is that all our boroughs and districts get these robust plans in place as soon as they can.
Indeed, I think probably Hinkley Bosworth is in the worst place of anywhere in the whole county. I mean, I have written to Stuart, the leader, to offer help, but I think they are really in a difficult position. But we're not discussing them today. But I recognise what you say, Peter. So anybody else want to say anything on this? No. So Charnwood local plan stuff, moved by me, seconded by Deborah. All in favour? Thank you very much, everyone. Agenda item 8. Adult social care reform, market shaping and charging reform, 675 to 694. This informs Cabinet of the work being undertaken in preparation for the government's planned adult social care reforms and the key implications for adult social care in Leicestershire as a result of charging reform. Seeks approval for submission to the Department of Health and Social Care of a market sustainability plan. Scrutiny, that's adults and communities, have looked at this on the 5th of September. Their comments are marked on the order paper marked 8. We've got the Assistant Director of Commissioning with Adults and Communities to present the report with us today. So that's you in Durgit, isn't it? Welcome, not seen you before, but you're welcome here. Over to you.
Thank you, Leader. So, as referenced in the previous report on the financial pressures within the county, this report gives details on the national adult social care reforms and the programme underpinning it. It provides details of forecasted cost pressures across a number of factors, including increased demand for social care assessments, staff capacity across the directorate to deal with this demand, the increased costs for providers, and significantly the changes to financial thresholds for people, and the notion of care caps, and they're detailed in paragraph 17 and a bit more detail in paragraph 26. The report also gives details of the mandated submissions to the Department of Health on the fair cost of care exercise. They're noted, they're noted as annexes A and B in the paper, and a draft market sustainability plan, which is part of the pack. Submissions for these documents are the 14th of October, and there's also a submission on the consultation for the allocated funding plans that we'll be commenting on. Cabinet will have noted the significant gap in funding as a result of the reforms, and based on our assumptions, a full-year effect of the gap is £17 million, and that goes up to £22 million at 2032 as the reforms take full effect. These are based on our estimates of funding that we'll receive, which we believe is circa 26 million for a full year, but as we receive more information, we'll refine those figures as we take things forward. The report seeks authorisation for the Director of Adults and Communities in consultation with the Director of Corporate Resources, and leave members to submit a response to the consultation and to submit the fair cost of care and the market sustainability plan draft. And a further report will come back to Cabinet on the final market sustainability plan, which is due in February. And as you've noted, Leader, Scrutiny made comments on this earlier this month.
I don't want to put you on the spot in Durgit, but today in the mini budget, they abolished the 1.5% of national insurance, which was supposedly going to fund this. What will happen? We still have to carry on with this, do we, even though the money which we're supposedly getting is not there, and hope that they're going to put it in somewhere else?
Potentially, I think it's, I mean, the gap is significant in any case. So, you know, the government have made these reforms, and I don't know if it's been fully thought through around the implications of this, in particular on the care capacity in the market, how this will affect providers, provider sustainability. There's a lot there. So care homes, for argument's sake, where we're looking at costs that we will pay as a council. There's self-funders who pay significantly more. The implications of our cost of care and how that impacts that. So there's a lot of factors, Leader, that we're considering. But going back to your statement, I'm not 100%. I wouldn't.
So your recommendation is still
I think we still
carry on,
proceed. Yeah, I think we still proceed.
but
Leader.
we worry yet again about money. Okay, so I've got you down, Christine.
Thank you, Leader. As today's reports highlights, the changing reforms set out by the government are far-reaching and likely to have a significant impact on the council's financial position. Whilst the figures in today's report are indicative and based on several assumptions, it is possible that the reforms could result in a 20 million gap between the funding available and the cost to the council. Of the 36 billion, the new health and social levy will rise over the next 3 years. Only 5.4 billion is ring-fenced to social care reforms. I wrote this before we knew what was going to happen today. These reforms include the introduction of a fair rate of care that councils will pay providers, whilst enabling those who currently arrange and pay for their own care to request their local authority arrange care on their behalf at local authority fee rates. The County Councils Network and Lang and Busian published a report showing that unless the government provided more funding to councils to pay a new fair cost of care, the care providers across England could face lost revenues amounting to 560 million a year. In a separate report, the County Councils Network and Newton estimate that the cost of reforms in the 9 years from when they are introduced to 2032 could be a minimum of 10 billion higher than currently estimated. If the reforms do end up costing more and there is no further funding from government, other council services may be negatively impacted to make up for the shortfall. In response to a consultation on the reforms, the government has announced it is phasing the implementation of the reforms. Instead of all self-funders currently in residential care being able to approach their local authority from October 2023 to request the local authority to arrange care on their behalf, only people entering after October 2023 will be able to do so for the first 18 months. Those already in residential care will not be able to do so until April 2025 under current plans. This is welcomed, but further consideration needs to be given to both the timing of the reforms and the cost of implementing them. The council will continue to work with local providers of care to ensure a sustainable and high quality care market which is efficient, effective and provides people with choice and affordable care. The draft market position plan attached to today's report goes some way to describe how the council will deliver this. As you can appreciate, Leader, that we are as a department quite concerned with how this is going to affect the support that we can give our vulnerable elderly people. And one day that might affect me and quite a few of us sitting around the table. So, I mean, it's not a laughing matter. We have got concerns as a council of how we're going to look after our elderly and vulnerable. Thank you anyway, Leader. So I think, is it now the time would like to propose that we accept the recommendations of outlined on the order paper?
Thank you, Chrissy. Maybe you should have declared an interest in this before you started speaking. Over to you, Louise, to second the motion.
I'm happy to second. I think it just goes to show what we were saying about the MTF, about how adults and communities and the children and families budgets are really at breaking point. And I think it shows how much the government has to start taking notice and to start funding properly so that we can maintain these services. These are areas that, you know, we can't cut back. We've done a lot of remodelling and, you know, officers have worked extremely hard in these departments and we do need the help from government on this. Thank you.
Very good. Some excellent comments. So moved by Christine, seconded by Louise. All in favour? Thank you. Thank you, Inderjit. You staying for the next one?
Yeah.
Ah, very good. Extra care service review and procurement 695 to 702 seeks approval for proposed changes in the way in which the elements of the extra care service will be commissioned and operated and the commencement of a procurement exercise for provision of care and support provided in extra care schemes. Let's note that Scrutiny Commission, Adults and Communities, looked at it on the 5th of September. Their comments are on the order paper marked 9, and then Judge, it's going to present it again.
Thank you, Leader. This one will be relatively short. So we've currently got 6 extra care schemes within the county, and 2 providers currently delivering those services. The contracts are currently in position until the end of the end of March next year. So as the report details, we'll be going out to procurement at the end of this month, or next month, for the new care contracts. It's anticipated that the procurement will yield a saving to the authority of around £250,000 a year. And the report also details a lot of the review work undertaken with tenants, families of the scheme, providers, both the housing association and the care providers, on a new way of delivery. So the report seeks authority for the Director of Adult Services to commence with the procurement of those services, but also noting the review work and changes to the wellbeing offer as part of the service.
Great, very good. Judge, Christine, this is yours.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I've got nothing further really to say, that we just need to go ahead with this and move forward, because we do need these extra people on board.
We do. Louise?
Happy to second.
The Chief's just told me you're the new Nigel Thomas then, Judge, eh?
I am, yes.
Travelled all the way from Dudley to work for us.
I have, yes.
It's a lot nicer here than Dudley.
It is.
Yeah. Anyway, you've done well. You're welcome. So moved by Christine, seconded by Louise. Thank you. Leicester and Rutland Safeguarding Adult Board Annual Report 2021-22, pages 703 to 718. It is the annual report. Adults and Communities have considered it again on the 5th of September. Comments attached marked 10. Heather Pick, Assistant Director for Adults and Communities, will present the report. It says you're joined by James Fox, but obviously, and we have James Fox online. He's Safeguarding Partnership Manager. So it's over to you, Heather, then I'm coming to you, Christine.
Thank you, Leader. So I'm presenting the Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding Adult Board Annual Report. It's the report of the former independent chair, Fran Pearson, who has left, and obviously in between recruiting a new chair. So I'm pleased to present it on behalf of the board. The key purpose of the annual report is to assess the impact and work undertaken by the board. And from the report, you can see the key messages. Partnership working across Leicestershire and Rutland and our other organisations is very strong, has been for a while now, but continues to be so. Significant pressures we have on health and care systems, as you're all aware, but despite that, the safeguarding assurance and the safeguarding board continues to be prevalent within that. We've had big focus this year on learning disability and autism, and raising awareness amongst professionals around the needs of that cohort. And you'll have had the leader reports, which is the reviews of early deaths of people with learning disabilities, now including people with autism and learning disability, or just autism. There have been a number of safeguarding adult reviews which are overseen by the board, and further analysis from those reviews around organisational learning and any impact of policy and procedure that we need to embed as a result of those reviews. And we've had further engagement and links with other organisations, voluntary sector, people themselves, which we have acknowledged there is much more work to develop, but is progressing by the board and is one of the board's key priorities going forward. And as part of the report, you'll see that we have had consultations with the public and adults with care and support needs themselves, and organisations. And I will leave it there to see if there's any more comments.
Very good, Heather. Over to you, Christine.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to thank all of those who worked on this report, carried out, thank them, and especially thank Fran. And Fran also attended our scrutiny meeting to answer any questions, even though she'd already left the post. I think it's a very good report, and it shows that we look at everything, and it was well scrutinised by the scrutiny committee. So I would like to propose that we accept the report.
Shame Fran's gone, really, isn't it?
It is,
We
yeah.
get on with
But I
that.
think she's got quite a busy load. She was doing a lot of other work as well.
Well, send her our regards.
Yeah.
We liked her.
Yeah.
Louise?
Happy to second. Thank you.
Okay then, Heather. Moved and seconded, all in favour? Thank you. And you'll send our thanks to Fran, will you? Thank you very much. So that was 10. We're now on to 11. Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding Children Partnership Annual Report 2021-22. Again, Children and Families this time was considered on the 6th of September. They're on the order paper marked 11. Got Nikki Collins, lead for transformation and planning within the Children and Families Department, to present the report. We've seen you before here, haven't we? You've been before? Good, well, welcome. You do it, then I'll be going to Deborah.
I'm here today to present the Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding Children Partnership Annual Report. The purpose of this report is to bring to the Cabinet's attention the annual report for the Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding Board 2011, oh, I'm way behind, 2021-22. The Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny Committee considered the annual report at its meeting on the 6th of September. The report was broadly welcomed and feedback made following the meeting, and minor amendments were made largely to provide more clarity. The key purpose of the annual report is to assess the impact of the work undertaken by the partnership on safeguarding outcomes for children, and it evaluates performance against the priorities that were set out in the business plan. The report outlines learning, assurance, training, improvement activity of the partnership and its partners, and the impact this has on safeguarding for children. Some of the key messages from the report include partner organisations, workers and managers have worked well together to safeguard children and to identify needs for improvement. The partnership has responded to emerging risks such as safeguarding babies. More work is required to understand how well the partnership works to safeguard children from diverse backgrounds. There remains room for improvement in how we listen to and respond to the voice and lived experience of children, and the partnership has worked to improve engagement with schools from all the sectors and improve learning processes. And the report itself contains a little bit more information about the actions taken to improve those areas.
As soon as you spoke, I knew I'd seen him. I knew you'd been before.
You recognise the voice?
Yeah. You're only South African, I think.
I am, Clintonian.
Yeah, indeed. Well, it's very important work you're doing anyway. Deborah.
Thank you. I'll move this recommendation. This report covers the work of the safeguarding partners over the last year, and all the partners are working really well together. And I think this report highlights the complex work that we face every day in keeping our children all safe. We are still looking at new ways of working and sharing good practice across Leicestershire and Rutland, and we also join up with the city a lot and have several meetings a year with their safeguarding partners. So it is a full LLR safeguarding work that we do. So that does work really well. And I am really pleased to see the voice of the child running through this report. We need to understand how our children, how our services affect those children and how we support them and the challenges that they face. But we also need to do more of that. So it's really important for me to see the voice of the child running through this. So I'm very happy to move the recommendation.
Excellent. Louise?
Happy to second. I think this and the previous paper show how important it is for partnership working across different organisations. I think we do safeguarding here very well. There's always room for improvement, but I think the report is very good. So happy to second.
Yep, highly valued work. Moved by Deborah, seconded by Louise. All in favour? Thank you. You're staying for the next one as well, Nikki, which is the Leicestershire County Council Community Safety Strategy 22 to 26. This is on pages 741 to 752. This will be submitted to the County Council in December. Scrutiny Commission have looked at it on the 7th of September. They're attached to the order paper marked 12. So it's over to you, Nikki. Is Gurjit here then? Is he online? Gurjit's online. Okay, Nikki.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is to advise the Cabinet of the outcome of consultation on the draft community safety strategy and seek approval for the final strategy to be submitted to the Council for approval. The Leicestershire Safer Communities Strategy Board coordinates community safety priorities across Leicestershire, and the Crime and Disorder Regulations 2012 introduced a requirement in two-tier local authority arrangements for a county-level strategy group to introduce a county-level community safety agreement. The community safety strategy sets out detail of the county council responsibilities and approach in dealing with crime and disorder matters within the context of a two-tier local authority arrangement. Paragraph 18 sets out the details of what is included in the strategy, as well as the current shared crime and disorder priorities, which include identify and protect the most vulnerable, reduce crime and the fear of crime, reduce the incidence and impact of all antisocial behaviour, reduce the harm from alcohol and substance misuse, reduce risk of harm to young people from cybercrime and bullying, increase reporting of domestic abuse and protect the most vulnerable, and increase confidence in reporting hate incidents. Consultation with stakeholders in relation to the draft strategy took place in July and August 2022. A total of 8 responses were received. Overall, the feedback was positive and was used to strengthen some aspects of the strategy. A summary of the consultation responses are included in paragraph 21 and 22. Additional feedback has been received setting out the need to ensure the link between the health and wellbeing strategy is made explicit in the community safety strategy to ensure the joint working within the staying healthy, safe and well is highlighted. This amendment will be made by the Community Safety Agreement. The draft strategy was considered by the Scrutiny Commission at its meeting on the 7th of September, and the feedback and comments from scrutiny are appended to the order paper. The Leicestershire Safer Community Strategy Board will be responsible for overseeing and coordinating the implementation and delivery of the strategy and partnership priorities which are set out in the Community Safety Strategy.
Thank you. Gurjit brings you there. Do you want to add anything or not?
No, that's absolutely fine, Leader. Thank you.
Nice to see you anyway. Deborah, you speak.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll move this proposal. I can't really add anything to what Nick has already put there. This has been an ongoing strategy for a long time now, and we just make tweaks every year, so it's pretty much similar to what it does. But the work across the Community Safety Partnership with the Police and Crime Commission and all the other agencies that they work with, including departments within the county council, all work really well towards this. And no, nothing further to add.
Thank you, Deborah. You've moved it, Louise.
Happy to second, and pleased that the link with the health and wellbeing strategy has been noted, and look forward to working more closely with you.
Okay, moved by Deborah, seconded by Louise. All in favour? Thank you. Send my regards to your husband, will you, Gurjit? Thank you. 13 is exception to contract procedure rules to provide adoption support fund therapeutic services 753 to 756. Seeking our approval to an exception of our rules. So it's over to you, Nikki.
Thank you. The Adoption Support Fund was established by the Department of Education in 2015 to support the therapeutic provisions needed by children who are adopted or under special guardianship orders, subject to their eligibility criteria. These criteria are very specific, and the providers have to be qualified therapists in their field and fully regulated. The Department of Education have set out specific terms for the ASF funding that require us to set up a list of approved suppliers. The department is therefore requesting an exception to the contract procedure rules to allow time for the framework agreement to be put in place and to ensure that in the meantime we're able to deliver services to adopted families and those children living with special guardianship carers, and that the interim arrangements will continue to ensure that we use approved and regulated therapists.
Deborah?
I'll move the recommendation. It's a simple procedure exercise that we need to go through to do an acceptance of the contracts. It just needs to be agreed by Cabinet, so nothing further to add.
Yeah, I agree. Louise?
Happy to second.
Moved and seconded. All in favour? Thank you. You're done then now, Nikki. Declan next. Corporate Asset Investment Fund Annual Performance Report 21 to 22, pages 757 to 786. Scrutiny Commission have considered the report on September 7th. Comments are attached. 14. Declan is the Assistant Director of Finance, Strategic Property and Commissioning within the Corporate Resources Department. Declan, go ahead.
Thank you, Leader. I'm pleased to report another positive year for the Corporate Asset Investment Fund. The fund's increased in value and generated more income than it did in the previous year. And in fact, this is the 7th year in a row that the fund has reported both capital and revenue growth. Although, as you would expect from a fund this size, it hasn't all been plain sailing, but the diversification of the investments and careful selection has allowed the overall position to improve. Cabinet will note that the capital value of the fund increased by £19 million in the year, with leaving the fund now valued at £206.8 million, which is an incredible increase from the start in 2014 of £40 million. As well as an increase in capital value, the fund has generated income of £8.7 million in the year. After costs, this delivers a net income to the council of £6.2 million, an increase of 35% on the previous year. The net figure takes account of a sinking fund and debt charge provision of £1.5 million, which has been set aside to help fund the one-off costs of remediation works at Firs Farm, Husband, Bosworth, and to mitigate any other financial shocks in the future. And whilst the returns may seem modest against the national benchmarks, it should remember that the fund substantially outperformed the market during the depths of COVID-19, and therefore external markets have started from a much lower base. The report also includes an overview of some of the major schemes in the development pipeline. The fund is well positioned to benefit from the housing growth in Leicestershire, with several sites either receiving planning permission or expected to be included in local plans. The fund will also benefit from the transition to renewable energy, with the 10 megawatt solar farm at Quorn receiving planning permission. The council's wider estate will also be assessed to see if there are any further opportunities. By way of quick update on the scheme at Lutterworth East, the legal challenge brought against Harborough District Council's issue of planning permission for our 2,750 home scheme by University Hospital Leicester has now been referred to the High Court in London for a full hearing, which is not expected before the end of this year. This will unfortunately delay the scheme and the delivery of much needed housing in the Harborough District. In conclusion, the 2021-22 year has overall been satisfactory for the fund, given the overall market. Thank you.
Very good. Lee?
Thank you, Chairman. What's pleasing about the cave is that it's not just about the money that we make, it's also about helping make Leicestershire a better place to work and live. If the first phase of Leaders Farm receives approval, jobs equivalent to 65 full-time employees would be created, and also the completion of Airfield Farm will deliver another 200 full-time jobs. Another benefit is the environmental, not just through the design standards of these new developments, but the creation of green energy. The solar farm at Quorn that Declan's mentioned will generate enough energy to offset all of the carbon emissions from county council buildings, which secure a very useful £900,000 per year of income. It's good to see that the report also covers some of the difficulties faced developing and managing the portfolio, which is a useful reminder of the hard work that goes into managing the portfolio. Overall, it's undoubtedly pleasing that the cave has enjoyed another successful year. It's good to see that Scrutiny Commission welcomed the report, and I'd just certainly like to thank all the team for their hard work and happy to propose the recommendation.
Thank you, Lee. Richard?
Happy to second that, Chairman.
All in favour? Thank you. Corporate Asset Management Plan 22-26, pages 787 to 838. Sets out the strategic direction for the corporate property resource over the next 4 years. Scrutiny Commission have looked at it, September 7th. Comments marked 15. And it's you again, Declan.
Thank you, Leader. So the Corporate Asset Management Plan covers the next 4 years and provides a framework for the strategic management of the council's property assets. The draft plan has been developed in line with the council's strategic plan and its medium-term financial strategy. Any estate strategy needs to provide the right property in the right place and meet the current and future needs of services. It should also ensure assets are managed and maintained effectively, efficiently and sustainably. Cabinet will note that the draft plan has 4 key ambitions per paragraph 16 of the report. A green estate with energy self-accountive, changes in the council's strategic objectives, availability of resource to support delivery, and a review of annual performance against the targets in the plan. In light of the council's deteriorating financial position, we shall be prioritising those projects that make a positive financial impact and the area-based asset challenge will also make a focus on this aspect. For example, the plan will ensure that all council properties are used in an optimal manner with good data analytics of our estate, which will lead to less reactive and more planned maintenance, leading to lower costs. The report also covers some of the existing activity being undertaken that will improve the performance of the property estate and deliver the places for services to be delivered, particularly the provision of new schools. Thank you.
Lee?
Thank you, Leader. The plan's a reminder to us all of how important physical assets are to the council and the services delivered. It's not just about the 643 property assets the County Council own, with a combined value of £652 million. 75% of the capital programme has a property element. A few examples are the Ways of Working programme that not only rationalises the office estate but generates rental income, delivers MTF savings of 1.4 million. £3.5 million worth of grant funding was secured for decarbonisation projects that have not only delivered environmental benefits but financial ones too. We will continue to deliver a new school a year for at least the next 5 years to support the county's growth. A good property plan isn't just important for investments, it's pleasing to see over £20 million being targeted from capital receipts from the plan. It's pleasing to see that the Scrutiny Commission fully support the plan. And finally, managed correctly, property is a true asset, and I thank all of the officers and staff involved in looking after our asset portfolio. Happy to propose the recommendation.
Richard?
Second that, Chairman. A really good example of self-help, I think.
Good. Deborah?
Thanks, Declan. I just wonder if we can, obviously with the financial pressures that we heard about at the beginning of the meeting, you know, selling assets could be one of those things that we have to look at to raise some money. But I suppose I'm just interested in what would be the non-financial benefits of keeping some of these buildings, you know, offering employment, all those sorts of things. Can we measure that alongside, you know, the financial gain we would with selling some of the assets? So I think there's just some two strands of work here that we need to be sure we're covering both of those.
Absolutely. So whenever an asset is identified as no longer needed by a service, it does go through a review across all the departments about is there any alternative use. So then we, as you say, we can take that broader piece. So whether it, you know, is it as simple as a financial kind of benefit that we don't have to, you know, buy a new asset and incur stamp duty, etc., or is there an alternative use, which we've done a few times with the social care investment programme and provided sort of accommodation for kind of children or adults in need of sort of social care support. So now absolutely we'll take that rounded view to make sure we're not just sort of like being a bit too narrow.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favour? Thank you. Thanks, Declan. Corporate Complaints and Compliments Annual Report 2021-22, 838 to 867. Simon Parsons, Corporate Complaints and Information Service, will present the report. Welcome, Simon. Had a tough year, I suppose, again. I see some of the ones you get. You must have the patience of Job down there. Anyway, over to you, Simon.
Thank you, Leader. So this report summarises the complaints activity for the 2021-22 year. Key messages to note really are a further 16% increase in complaints. So that's followed a kind of 5-year, year-on-year similar sort of rate of increase. The report highlights 2 specific areas which saw significant rise during the last year around special educational needs assessment and related to that special educational needs transport. Significant work happening in both those areas, and particularly in the transport arena, there have been clear improvements this year. It's worth noting on that. The SEN assessment area still remains an area with significant pressures just to the rise in volume and demand in that area, and will be a much harder area for some time. Although not directly comparable, I'm pleased to say the level of cases escalating to the local government and social care ombudsman, whilst it did increase slightly, importantly, levels where findings of maladministration and importantly financial redress recommendations fell last year across the board. So that was good to see, and I'm pleased to say no public reports issued. To add balance to the report, we always include compliments received, and again I'm pleased to say there was a slight increase last year, which provides important balance and some of the positive stories that are still going on. The report touches on the two statutory complaints areas as well, both in adults and children's social care, and broadly those remain fairly stable, with only really one area that's a noticeable increase in adult social care around charging, a lot of complexity through the pandemic period around charging and health funding, which created degrees of complexity are at the heart of that really. Final thing to say, it is fair to say it's a challenging environment, has been for the last 12 months and continues to be. So inevitably there has been some pressure through the year on response timescales to complaints. However, it's important that in the round across the board, 92% of those complaints are still being responded to within policy timescales, which in the challenging environment is no mean feat.
Thank you, Simon. Lee, this is one of yours.
Thank you, Leader. I think it's just a case that Simon didn't mention it. Compliments also increased throughout the year, so there was an increase in compliments as well, and we don't get them very often for the work we do and how we're pictured to be doing the job. But yeah, that's good news as well. Thanks, Simon, and also Gordon for the detailed report. I think the reasons in the report for the various outages are set out, and I just go back to the purpose of the report that we have. One of the purposes is to demonstrate how some of the learning from complaints and compliments have been used to shape future service delivery and improve the overall customer experience. I assure everyone out there listening, and certainly members of the Cabinet and this Council, that we are doing this, and it's well used and it's a good report. Thank you. Happy to make the recommendation.
Thank you. Richard, you're next.
I second that, Chairman. Thank you.
Deborah wants to speak, then you, Ozzy.
Yeah, obviously, really good to see both compliments, because we never very get that. We only get things when people are complaining. But just want to pick up on the special education needs. I mean, I understand parents and carers' position. I'd be exactly the same if that was my parent. I'd be shouting from the rooftops from my child as well. So I get where that comes from. My concern is, obviously, as we've talked about, having to make some service cuts, and probably SEND will be one of those areas that we need to look at really carefully. Those complaints are likely going to increase across the board and across the county council. I just wonder how we're going to cope with that as we move forward into really more difficult times. How we're going to cope with those complaints.
Yeah, I think it's probably I agree. It's probably inevitable that they will rise further. Through this year, it's worth saying that we've added some additional resilience within the teams, particularly in the special educational needs area. We've funded a specific complaints kind of resolution post within that to help those busy case managers there. So there is this year some additional resource in there already to help tackle that. And as I say, that hopefully, along with the work that's going on with the external partner Newton Europe, which will hopefully reshape some of those processes and practices, we'll have to keep an eye on it. But I think it's absolutely an expectation in my view that they will rise for the year ahead as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Simon. Ozzy.
Thank you, Deborah. Actually came across with what I was going to say actually, but also I'd like to, on top of that, thank the officers, because it is a stressful job dealing with transportation and special education needs and with the parents. And I can understand the parents' problems, because if, as a parent myself, you know, I would have the same impact and concerns. But as you highlighted, the resources have really done well this year. The officers have worked hard, they've started early, and to their credit, and I want to give a thank you to them, both on the special education needs and the transport sector, for what they have done to achieve this year. They've really improved.
Yeah, certainly it's a stressful job down there, Simon. You and your team do good work, so thank you. Moved and seconded, all in favour? Thank you. Thank you, Simon. 17 is items referred from overview and scrutiny. There are none. Any other items which are urgent? There are none. We now have to bring the public part of the meeting to a close, and I have to formally move that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded for the following item of business on the grounds that involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 1, 3 and 10 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, and that in all circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. I'll formally move. Deborah?
I'll second.
All in favour? Thank you. We now have to wait a little minute.